Spoilers ahead for Star Trek Picard, Star Trek generally, bit of Doctor Who, bit of Blake Seven, bit of all kinds of
Mhm,
stuff. Spoilers for
mhm.
science fiction in general.
Yeah, we're just going to spoil everything.
Spoil everything. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Script Department. Today is a really, really special episode because I'm so excited. We're joined today by Una McCormack, a New York Times bestseller, broadcaster, academic, mentor, member of the Obsidian Order, all around excellent, excellent person. So, welcome, Una. Thank you so much for joining us today for this chat. It's so cool to speak
My
to you.
absolute pleasure. I love that CV. I think maybe announcing myself as a member of the Obsidian Order, but I do have the tattoo these days, so it's kind of given away.
Well, this is the thing, you're marked for life, so it
I
is.
am.
You can't get away with it. Um, Una, it's so good to see you again, Una. We met at a recent event that we'll talk a bit about perhaps at the end. But we were lucky enough to sit and have lots of very interesting conversations about storytelling in a rather lovely library, which was a bit of a treat. So this conversation is very much picking up from where we left off a few months ago, I think.
Yeah, we had a great time, didn't we? We should insist on people doing that for us more often, I think. Just take us to an interesting location and let us sit in a library for hours at a time, I think.
I
It was
totally agree.
great.
At some point, maybe we'll do a sequel to this where we go and find two armchairs and a roaring fire, and we can
Yeah, lemon flag, ideally, somewhere in Oxford.
yeah, that'd be great. So a little
Smoke
bit,
our pipes.
yeah. Oh God, that'd be lovely.
Yeah.
So a little bit of context, dear viewers. Una is the author of many tie-in novels, including Star Trek Picard, Best Hope, a couple of Doctor Who things out there. There's a lovely Firefly one, which I'm about halfway through at the moment, called Carnival, Blake Seven, few originals, absolutely wonderful. And I love one of the names of your originals, very humbly titled The Greatest Story Ever Told, which I it made me
Yeah,
laugh.
I thought, let's see how far we can get away with it. There is a good reason. There is a good reason for it. It's a retelling, obviously, of it's both the kind of Spartacus, it's the Spartacus story on Mars, or Marticus, as a friend of mine called it. And I thought I'll nick the title of that movie about the life of Christ, the greatest story ever told, and sort of subvert that. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
why not?
yeah,
The
why not?
never-ending sacrifice is another one. So writing can feel a bit like that sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. You've also written recently for Big Finish, the new War Master thing that's coming out, which I'm incredibly excited about. Full cast drama with Derek Jacobi and David Tennant. Oh wow, cool.
Derek Jacobi. I mean,
Yeah,
really? I know
yeah,
it's insane. Big Finish. It's just insane. You say, yeah, I'll do a little play, and then you go, oh look, David Warner's in this one, or oh look, Sir Derek Jacobi's in this one. It's just absolutely crackers. They just do a brilliant job. People just really enjoy doing them. They get terrific people. I think my kid was more excited that the actress in that one, the lead woman, is played by someone who's on one of her favorite kids show, Swashbuckle. So she was really, yeah, exactly. So she was like, Derek Jacobi, whatever, until I said that's Iggle Piggle, and then she had a context.
yeah. That's a different thing. If it's Eagle Piggle now, that's something, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Not Cadfall or anything, but yeah. But I'm really pleased with that one. It's come out really well. It's come out it's come out quite Blake Seveny and sinister, and they all give it everything. I think that's I think I got notes back on that one saying, "Look, you've got Derek Jacobi, just go for it.
Go for
Give
it.
him
Yeah.
something to really kind of give with welly." So, and then all the actors said nice things about the script. So I'm feeling very good about that one.
It's always nice when actors say nice things about your script.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
The nice bit, that one. Well, it's interesting because I think it's so interesting to talk to you about this stuff because you have written in multiple worlds, and adaptation I think is such an interesting thing to look at for writers of any discipline. But specifically, you do something really interesting with your tie-in stuff because you're taking something from a visual medium and you are taking it and putting it into prose, which fascinates me. The idea of that as a screenwriter and as a visual kind of writing for that visual medium absolutely fascinates me. And long-time viewers will know that I'm a Star Trek fanatic. Absolutely loved it. So when I picked up your book, Star Trek Picard: Best Hope, there's a plug. Um, it was it was so interesting to see that. So I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you go about when you're approached to write something like this? How do you go about transferring it from that visual world to the page? Big question.
Well, this is actually a question I've thought a lot about because I used to teach creative writing for a very long time and taught at a university. And one thing that rapidly became clear to me, the more I thought about my own writing and the more I try to teach writing, and that makes you try and understand other people's sources and instincts for creativity, is that I basically have no visual imagination.
Oh
I
wow!
do not. Yeah, I do not have a kind of, I do not form a picture in my head. I do not form images in my head. I think there's actually there's a sort of condition called aphantasia, which is sort of covers this, which is that you just don't. When I read, I don't form I don't form images at all. It's very closely connected to sort of not having very good recall memory as well. I have a very poor memory. So I do have an extremely good auditory imagination. I imagine in sound rather than in
Wow!
visuals. And once I realised this, many things became clear to me about the kinds of things that I like to write, the kinds of things I enjoy reading, the ways that my imagination is triggered. And just everything began to make sense all of a sudden. Because I think, on the whole, most people form some kind of visual image. So if you ask me to picture an apple, I mean, I don't know what other people are doing, but I don't get an image at all.
That's so interesting.
I, I have a sense of an apple, or I can more easily imagine the crunch of it or the flavour of it. I get a bit peckish now, but I really don't. I mean, I don't know what other people do, but so when I sort of went, oh, I don't visualise at all. Lots of things became clear. Firstly, that I get stimulated. My imagination gets triggered by seeing visual things. So art really inspires me. Landscape, because it's not something I can supply for myself, and we're leading towards the answer to your question, things that I watch on screen.
Amazing. Right.
So that's why I started writing fan fiction, I think, because the things that I was seeing on screen were particularly inspiring me. And that's how I got into TV tie-in writing. So I had read Lord of the Rings since I was well, I'd read The Hobbit as a kid, and then I listened to Lord of the Rings in the 80s, early 80s, the radio, read it, repeatedly from about the age of 10. But I didn't start writing fan fiction on it until I saw the Peter Jackson movies, yeah? So that's
Ah,
what triggered
right.
that's what set it off. So it's a lack of visual imagination, which means the imagination is triggered by visual stimulus. And then if you take a look at my books, the nice thing about this is that I don't have to rely, on the whole, on any visual description at all. If I talk about Jean-Luc Picard, you've immediately got a picture of that man in your head. Yeah. If I talk about the Bridge of the Enterprise, I don't need to give you a sketch of that. You apparently already have this in your head.
Mm, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I could just get onto the really good stuff that I like, which is dialogue, uh, feeling and emotion and big ideas, and that's the stuff I'm interested in, and none of that tedious description needs to be done because I can't picture it. So
But
that's my
so,
secret. I have some other
that's
secrets as
so
well, but
I'd love to hear this at some point, maybe offline. But we, but
yeah.
the that's so interesting because there's a particular moment from the Star Trek Picard novel that really jumped out to me, and I think for as a screenwriter, and I'm going to read it to you because I think
Ooh.
it's really extraordinary. There's a wonderful speech that's given to the Federation Council in Paris. And I'm not going to do the whole thing because I'm focused on a very specific area. So I'm just going to do the end of that and then how it crosses up over to another sequence. So Quest says, and most of all, we must ensure that our neighbors know that we have not come to take advantage of them in their hour of need. She opens her hand, an open book gesture. We are not conquerors. Verity. Picard muted the sound. Hey, said Raffi. I was listening to that. Now, this seems like kind of an innocuous moment to pick, but what leapt out at me as a screenwriter and as a visual writer is that's very much a visual leap. Or I suppose actually, interestingly, I'm putting that together on what you just said. Actually, it's an audible leap, isn't it? Because he's muting the sound, which is so interesting. But you can picture immediately, Picard, you have the screen. I can see it right there. You're looking at it through the television screen. You're looking at Quest delivering this speech, all kind of, blah, 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 blah. And then it pulls back, and you realize it. You realize you've been looking at a screen. Picard mutes it. Raffi, hey, and you're suddenly in a different sequence. And that's a tried and tested screenwriting technique for moving between scenes. And there you are employing a book. And I just went, this is great, because it so beautifully mirrors the original medium of the thing you're writing. And you do this with a few times in this, with the beginning chapters with captain's logs and things like that. So to hear that doesn't necessarily come from a visual point of view is so interesting, because I would never have known.
It's almost all speech there, there's an open book gesture, which I think, isn't there? Don't the Cowat Malats have a gesture like that as well? I think so. She's sort of they do, yeah. I'm picking up on her, because she's not truthful in any way. She's sort of all in the subtext Quest, so it's a kind of ironization of that. But everything is, if you look if you look at that, it's all dialogue. You've done all that work for me. So, which is great. It's absolutely great.
It's absolutely there in the subtext, and that is, and I think that's the thing with writing for film, which is such an important thing, because we can't. And I'm going to leap to the next point there, which is there's another lovely section there, which in the book, a description. You again talk about not being able to write visually, but the river ran on, the leaves drifted, and in the valley the wind chimes sang a song that would never be heard again. It's a beautiful piece of description there of a now vacant planet that's been depopulated because of this terrible thing. That is, if we were again to look at adapting from the visual to prose, that's the joy of being able to give that kind of narration, is that you can't do that on screen. You could perhaps have Picard standing there and go, look at this landscape and listen to those wind chimes that will never be heard again. But it's just
but you could do that visually. I think you could. I don't know. I mean, I can't picture this, but I can sort of imagine what I can try and imagine what someone might do. I mean, again, if you look at those sentences, what strikes me when you read them is that there isn't much description. The river, the leaves, they're very, very plain. I've leaned a lot into the wind chimes because that gives it a bit of movement, and I imagine that you would. I guess what you could do. I don't know what you do because I can't direct, because I can't see it. Picard would be looking out, so you might maybe go over his shoulder. He would dematerialize, and maybe somebody in the middle distance next to him would sort of dematerialize. You'd have had the wind chimes over that as he was speaking, dematerialize. The chimes keep going, the wind picks up, and maybe we would pan out to an empty. I don't know. I'm just guessing what people would do. But if you look at those words, there's very, very little actual description there. It's all just suggestion. I'm making you do the work.
That's the whole thing. That's exactly my point, though, is that it's very, I think that's probably what makes you so great at writing something that originated on screen, because that's exactly what a screen does. And that's exactly what a film does. And that's exactly what a TV show does. It gives you the images, and you have to read into them to understand what's being implied. The slow kind of zoom in on the empty valley that is implied there, it's described, is actually just a zoom in on an empty valley with the wind chimes going, and and silence and things like that, and the wind rushing through. But what you what you do as the audience and as the reader here is you fill in those blanks, and I think it's
Yeah.
what makes it so compelling for me as a screenwriter to read these books, is that I'm engaging that same part of my brain that I would do
Good.
to read a screenplay as I am
Good.
to read your tie-in novels, and I think that's so interesting.
And that's perfect because I can't do that. I couldn't direct because I wouldn't have those images there. What I am quite good at, I think, is that and I've talked about this with other people, but this might be helpful here, is I'm quite good at conning you that I do have something visual in mind, when in fact what I'm doing is I'm asking you to remember an emotion that you have felt. So what I'm asking you to remember in that is melancholy, an experience of melancholy, and an experience of something feeling very empty, and perhaps a disorientation or almost even fear from that. Um, so ideally, what I'm doing because there's no description to do that, and it's not filtered through anyone's emotion, because we'll come on to, I've gone into omniscient there, is that I'm trying to kind of trigger that emotion in you. And we've all heard wind chimes at the end of a day, yeah? We all know what that sounds like. When the day has ended, the people have gone home, the wind chimes are tingling. There's something a little bit eerie about them. They're playful in the morning, but they're eerie. And all of it, all that kind of, I want you to remember a sound like that and the emotion that you felt. And if I've got that, then you can plug in whatever image you want. I don't mind. Plug in your own valley. I mean, I can't picture one, but you'll have one in your imaginative stock, and that's all I need to do. But it's the emotion I'm trying to trigger in you, and I'm doing that mostly through sound, I think. But
Well,
people
sound
apparently have all these pictures in their heads.
yeah. Well, sound is a great tool for that. I mean, you hear people talk
Yeah,
about music taking you back to a time. There's a
yeah,
particular for my sins. There's a particular Coldplay song which takes me back to my kitchen at university in my first year,
yeah,
and
exactly
it
that.
puts me there, and I can smell it, and I can feel it. I shut my eyes, and I'm there,
Yeah,
and I know I'm there. And so I think that's so interesting to utilize sound in lieu of description to trigger that.
yeah.
That's an interesting way of looking at that.
There's a very interesting one of the people who was on the at the event that we met has just interviewed the dialect coach for the Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings series, Leith. Oh, I've just blanked on her name. Leith McPherson, I think it is. Anyway, James Torber at the Digital Talking Project has interviewed her, and she talks about having an auditory imagination as well. So it's no surprise then to find her kind of going into coaching dialect and so forth. But I do think it's a thing that and I guess, I mean, I'm not a musician in any way. I can sing, and I like music. Can't write or listen to music, of course, because they're in the same space. But I think it's really interesting to realize that there are people who imagine in that way as well, and it's a much more. I think it's a little bit. I think because we've got so much visual stimulus these days, and most of what we consume in terms of narrative is through TV or film, that our experiences of just consuming through sound are quite rare now. There's probably something else going on at the same time. So it's I'm very interested in this subject. I think most people are a little bit of both, but I know I'm very much on one end of the spectrum, and there's that more people incline the other way. I'm jealous of friends who can do both, but I can't. So
I
I
get it.
trick you to think that I
Yeah. There's a
can.
lot of it. It's so you're walking into the situation, and somebody has come to you and they've said, Una, we want a prequel, I suppose, to Star Trek Picard season
Mhm.
1. So it needs to end up with presumably people in their starting places
Mhm.
for Star Trek Picard, or at least to show that they're going to get there.
Mhm.
How much do you need to consider the themes of the series? Do you feel as though is this a because what I found when I finished the book is I then watched the first couple of episodes of Star Trek Picard,
Mhm.
just to run into it, and I watched what was the last one? Nemesis was the last film, I think,
Mhm.
wasn't it? And then I read your book, and then went on to Star Trek Picard to just feel that kind of continuation, and it really really worked. It was a really
Good.
a really great kind of continuation of that. How aware of that are you, of the kind of the wider canon, the wider lore, where things are going, where things have been? It's possibly a stupid question, but I just wonder how much emphasis you put on it for telling your specific story.
So I would say I'm not sure I rewatched Nemesis, actually. I probably did. I can't remember now. I probably watched relevant bits. Certainly, I was very, very, very... I was getting multiple versions of the scripts through of season 1 as they were being written. And I got quite immersed in those. I didn't really need to know what happened, of course. It didn't really matter how it turned out because my book was ending 15 years before it starts. But I very, very much wanted to capture, I guess TV and screenwriters call it the tone, yeah. And there was a kind of elegiac and melancholic tone, particularly to those opening episodes, and it was there in the scripts as well. As I read them, they felt autumnal. That the palette was going to be kind of oranges and browns and these kinds of things. The scripts were beautiful, actually. They were really really nice. Michael Chabon and others. They were a beautiful read. So that kind of melancholy tone, that kind of that autumnal phase of life, I think, was something I wanted to put straight into the book. It should feel like the last days of summer in many ways. Yeah, it's the sort of very, very pinnacle of Picard's career just before it goes into this crisis mode. Really, he gets fired basically. Well, he resigns, does he? He doesn't get fired. He gets invited not to come back, I think, or they take him up on his offer. So certainly in terms of tone, and this of course would direct many choices, such as I think there are various bits of I'm sure I got some rotting fruit in there or something like that, yeah. But all of these kinds of things, the kind of elegiac wind chime moment, which I love too, I'm glad you picked that. All of that I was kind of feeding into this book because I wanted it came out as the first season was being transmitted. I think it came out between episodes 3 and 4, so it really should feel coherent. Yeah, it came out just after we'd seen the Kawat Milat on screen, so they really timed it well. Yeah, it was incredibly. Wow. Yeah. You kind of read it between 2 episodes and get all this backstory. It all makes sense now. So they'd really thought it through. So it should have had that feel. It should have had that consistent feel with the show, and I think that was a particular case. I mean, we try and do this with other books as well, but that one in particular, I think, was very, very tightly woven with the show, very, very much guided by it. It's a lot unhappier ending. It's quite a downer book.
That is absolutely a tragedy, and it fits so perfectly into that narrative kind of bracket. It really is.
Yeah,
it's a tragic read. It's the fall of. It's the conclusion of, because I think you're right. The tone, I missed some of the formulaic tone of Star Trek Picard that you would find in those original series and Next Generation rather, and that kind of era of things. I missed that episodic feeling in favor of the kind of longer story. I loved the longer story and I really enjoyed that, but it didn't feel like the Star Trek I remembered. What your book does is to kind of cross the bridge, as it were. It allows you to go from what you're used to, and with your captain's logs, inclusions, and things like that, and then usher you into this new era of retirement and things like that. Which I think, and you really achieved that. This very much enhances the tone and the understanding of that series. And
thank you. I'm really pleased with it. I think it was a great project to get. Would you like to do the first Picard book? Hell yes. I think everyone was worried I didn't have much time, and I was going, no, I'll be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. It'll be all right. The due date is quite soon. It's all tied into the show. Going, I'll be fine. Sure, it'll be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. But I just felt very confident. We'd done a lot of work up front. I worked very closely with Kirsten Beyer, who's one of the co-creators of Picard, and has written on it and written on Discovery and so forth. And we really worked quite hard on the outline. We really thrashed it out and thought about what we wanted to do. We wanted it to be a really good book. And then once your outline's there, really, you've just got to get your bum in the seat and write the book. So I was confident.
exactly
They were
how
all a
I
bit worried for me.
yeah, exactly how
I
I
remember finishing it. Actually, I was sitting at the university library, and I kind of went, "Oh God, it's done!
it's done.
Wow, okay, I'm done. I'm free. I can go and have a sleep now." Yeah.
Absolutely. In terms of the way it fits into kind of the wider canon,
Mm.
the there's a wonderful amount of, and I know it's unfair, I suppose, because I have some insider knowledge, but I couldn't help but notice the DS9 references dotted through, and there's so
Yeah.
many lovely little DS9 references in there. Um, but one thing I found really interesting is because the Romulan supernova,
Mm,
in terms of the lore of Star Trek, is a remnant of the J.J. Abrams 2009 stuff,
mm,
because that is how Spock then ends up in the past and things like that. What
mhm,
was it your decision? And just out of interest, was it your decision to Spock is there briefly? He pops up and he kind of says hello as Picard is going past on the Verity. Um,
mhm.
was it a deliberate choice to kind of leave that plot line that led to the kind of Kelvin universe, to Kelvin timeline, to one side and
Yeah.
focus in on Picard? Because it's interesting. I wondered what the thought process was there.
Yeah, I think I think partly we knew that trying to reconcile everything is going to drive you mad. Maybe we had a sense that with Picard coming back, I can't quite remember now, but maybe we had a sense with Picard coming back that maybe that whole plot line was up for grabs again. I can't remember now where where Discovery was at the same time. There was probably stuff happening in the writers' room at Discovery that I wouldn't have been privy to. Um, I can't quite remember now whether that little mention of Spock has been kind of we used to call it Jost, yeah, when you would do something and then Joss Whedon would write something differently.
Uh,
I can't remember now if that's kind of been decanonized, as it were. But we had good reasons for putting Spock in. I think we felt he ought to be mentioned. But I can't quite remember now whether it works.
no,
That
I
whole
think,
period is really in flux, and yeah,
yeah. Oh no, no, for
it was
sure.
worse doing the Spock book. My God, it was you're trying to
Oh God,
reconcile
I bet.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to get Discovery to work with the animated series. It was absolutely crackers.
Oh
We
wow.
found a way through, I think. Yeah,
I haven't got to that
but
one yet. I'll pick that up at some point because that would be interesting.
you'll
Because
enjoy that. It's a
what's
good read.
going on
Yeah.
with Strange New Worlds now as well, and the
Mm.
Spock has a brother knocking around somewhere as well, which he is just entirely absent from Discovery, and it's interesting.
Yeah, well, the
Yeah.
brothers from Star Trek Five, the
Mm,
movie, of course. So the
yeah. Yeah.
brothers
Yeah.
from there. So no, he doesn't pop up in. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about that. I go into that in my Spock book, but I think that has now been bits of that have now been decanonized. I think you just. I mean, I just think about it like Arthurian legends now.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
lots of different versions, and it's a sign of the strength of the underlying setup that people are able to tell different stories on top of it. So as long as you don't try and make it I mean, I have a hard enough time reconciling reality. Yeah. So trying to reconcile made up stuff that lots and lots of people have been involved in as creators, I just don't. I like the rough edges more than anything else. So
Yeah.
you know,
I'm inclined to agree with you. I think that Spock's
mm,
little he's there and he has a moment. He pops up. He's leaving Romulus, and I thought that was lovely
mm,
because it ties in very neatly with the Next Generation stuff,
yeah,
reunification and things like that. It was a
yeah,
lovely moment there, and yeah, no, I think you're right. Trying to we've covered the Star Wars stuff a lot on this channel, and we've
mm,
just done a Obi-Wan Kenobi thing. We covered Boba Fett. Um, so we've had a lot of conversations there. And Brad, one of the guys on here, quite often has a little catchphrase, which is, this is a prequel of a sequel of a reboot of a, you know, and it's like how do you keep track of things like that? It's and of course there are people out there that do, and
yeah,
but they tend to be the people that aren't actually necessarily doing the writing of it, and are have
yeah.
to sit back and kind of look at the whole thing. So it's quite
We've
interesting.
got a fantastic guy called Dayton Ward who has written many, many, many Trek novels, and he knows more about more about Star Trek than I could ever hope, and not just on screen. He's got kind of encyclopedic knowledge of what was in the books and that kind of thing. So he's a consultant on these books, and particularly the Spock one. You kind of put the outline. He would go, well, if you that's kind of you've forgotten this one line in the menagerie or something.
Sure,
Yeah, okay.
sure.
You're quite right. I have forgotten that. And but then he'll say, now if you just tweak that here, it's a lovely call out to a book by Margaret Wanda Bonanno or something, and we can kind of, just and you go, that is perfect, because I maybe read that 20 years ago, but he's just got it all in his head. So it's a great job.
Yeah,
if you got the information. I know, but Dayton is on top of it. If in doubt, hand it to Dayton. He'll be able to tell us whether it works or not.
I love it. So in terms of dialogue, so I also had a read of so Picard I've got, and I read Doctor Who Royal Blood as well, which I really, really enjoyed. And I, like I say, I'm halfway through Carnival, and all of these three things have very, very specific ways of speaking. Picard has a very specific way of speaking. The 12th Doctor has a very specific way of speaking, and the entire Firefly verse has a wonderful, very stylized way of communicating with the kind of fusion of language there. How do you go about taking dialogue and taking speech patterns, I suppose, and kind of weaving them into these things to make it feel like it's part of that same project?
Oh, well, this is the kind of thing, it's harder for me to sort of explain what I do, because it does come very naturally. I always loved writing dialogue. Or it's very easy for me to write audio plays, for example. It's quite harder to make them exciting. I think you can get it can get two talking heads. Yeah. So it's hard to mix it up. But writing dialogue was always very, very easy. I found it, and I liked to mimic as a child. I was quite a good mimic. So it was very easy for me to sort of pick up on speech cadence. And once that's put through once an actor has done that, and if an actor's done it, if the dialogue is good, and the actor, as they almost invariably do, does a really good job and kind of lifts that dialogue off the page into life, I just find it very easy to capture that. You've just got to you've got to read it out loud ultimately.
Yeah.
Does it sound like something that Matt Reynolds would say? I've forgotten his name though. Honestly, all the nouns are slipping away. Mal Reynolds. Does it sound like something Mal would say? And the way Mal talks is completely different from the way Jane talks. Yeah, Mal has got this very, like you say, hyper stylized, almost. It's quasi Shakespearean in many ways. It's
very
quite.
poetic.
Yeah, old-fashioned, and then Wash is much more contemporary. It's much more Generation X, I'd call it. Yeah, it's sort of self-referential and jokes. You can see he's more from a core planet. And then you've got kind of Simon. Simon is also quite precise, and you can imagine him talking in parentheses.
Yeah.
Because he's presenting an educated man, and he's kind of hanging on to that because he's not able to live there anymore. So, and then Jane just really talks in grunts and swears. So, although Jane too has a sort of it's pared down. There's a sort of poetry to that as well, I think. Yeah, it's always on point with Jane, I think. There's not much of it, but it's on point. And then River, you have to make fragmented, but there's a kind of underlying structure to it that perhaps you can't quite understand yourself yet. So they've all got these, you've just got to be attentive to, you've got to listen to what the dialogue is doing, the actors are doing, and just follow the sentence structure and the kind of vocabulary they would use. Firefly's really good fun in this respect, because I think if you don't get it right, people really feel it. Inara is quite a tricky one. The hardest one I found to write was Book, actually, which I didn't expect, because because I love that character. I found him really interesting, but he was very difficult to get down on the page. I think he's quite an elusive character, isn't he? We find out about his past in one of the comic books, though I'd kind of guessed it. That he was probably an operative, but there are so many layers that you're never quite sure which man is going to speak. Is it going to be the assassin? Is it going to be the preacher? Is it going to be the simple man of God? Is it going to be this more complicated man of violence. So that was difficult to that was harder to do than I expected. We'll see
Yeah.
where it goes. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting the way that to talk a book particularly because you put him into a position in this particular story where he's placed in this situation where he has to act. And like I say, I'm only halfway through, so don't no spoilers, please. But
Zip.
yeah, but he's him and Zoe are kind of locked up in this area, and you get this. You feel the change of tone in his he's very considered. He's still very considered, but there's almost a joy coming from him when he starts talking about well, we could do this and we could do that, and the whole idea that people are looking at him going, "Damn, Shepard, what the hell do you know?"
Yeah.
And there's
Zoe's not fooled for a moment, you know.
absolutely not. No, and but
Yeah.
there's such a joy when there feels like such a joy in this story when he gets to do that thing again. He gets to be that person again for a little while, albeit still still the holy man and still kind of in disguise. But you kind of it's almost doctorish in the sort of the joy that's the joy in the chaos, and
Yeah.
the enjoyment and the control of the chaos, and I loved that kind of element of that character.
Good.
So that's really
There's
interesting.
there's a moment in Deep Space Nine, because I always go back to Deep Space Nine, where they have to take Garrick they take Garrick with them on a mission, and he suddenly flips out of being a tailor into being someone that you go, who you know how to give orders and expect them to be obeyed, and then he flips back out, and Andy Robinson, of course, is completely consummate and doing it behind ridiculous amount of latex. But I love those. It's all in the and with an actor as well, it's done in body language, so he becomes he becomes tenser, he becomes more, the shoulders are pushed back. Garrick the tailor is something a little bit more slippery and performed, and he just flips between it, and the delivery changes, and exploring those moments with Book, I think it's a really fruitful thing to do. Yeah,
That's such
there
an
are
interesting
layers there.
comparison. Yeah, that's such an interesting comparison because they are very, very similar when you actually
Oh
boil
yes.
that down. That's not a comparison I'd thought of before. That's
Oh
really
yes,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Garrick hasn't had his time in the monastery by the
No,
time we leave him in Deep Space Nine, but I think it's coming. Uh,
yeah, I think
uh,
you're probably
uh,
right. There's
yeah.
a definite redemption of that character. Um,
Mm.
you obviously you have your original work as well. What's it like for you when you get the opportunity to just write something for you, and you get to just go, you know what, I'm going to tell a story that I want to tell, and I don't need to worry about what Spock was doing. I don't need to worry about what Book's doing in 5 minutes and things like that. I mean, you can build something from the ground up. Is that a refreshing experience, or does it all kind of come under the same
it's a
thing?
bit It's a bit terrifying. I mean, all my DS9 books, my books with Garrick, which are in post-war Cardassia, I had so much freedom that yeah. I mean, they just let me do whatever I want. Not quite. I wasn't quite there. I didn't get to do the last book I wanted to do for various reasons. Just because the show moved on and they kind of reset it, and that set of books have kind of ended now, that timeline. So there was one last book I did want to do, but I pretty much got to do whatever I wanted with that character, and took him to places that I was really interesting. Cardassia, I got to do loads of things with as well. Though I would have loved to have done a lot more. So for a lot of the time, I just felt like it was my stuff, but it just happened to be using characters from Star Trek.
Sure. Yeah,
Um, so it always feels like mine to some extent, or I kind of set up shop. I guess I go and squat in someone else's, you know, house for a little while. There's a
yeah,
whole
yeah.
chunk in the Spock book where I have Spock on Romulus, and I got really absorbed in that. I'd have happily have written a trilogy just of that setup. I could have
Oh, wow.
happily done. Yeah, I feel I sort of regretfully had to put that into about 5,000 words. I was going, oh,
Ah,
I can see the 3 novels I could
yeah.
happily tell here. They would be awesome, and they're just going to have to stay in my head. So it's always felt like my stuff. And then I don't know. I've never have I written a sort of. I'm not sure I've written a novel length book of my own stuff. I've certainly done novellas and short fiction. I should probably do more. I should probably stop getting hooked on other people's properties and just do my own stuff. But then I'd have to come up with all this description. It would be dreadful. I wouldn't
That's
be able to go, Jean-Luc
no,
Picard, you know what he looks like,
yeah,
instead of
no,
going, some
uh,
person.
yeah, Patrick Stewart. He looks a bit like that.
Yeah, yeah, he had the air of a starship captain. Yeah,
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's
yeah. So, but I really enjoyed writing novellas, which gave me a sort of tighter um, canvas, to a smaller canvas to work on. The couple I've done I found very rewarding. So yeah, I should try and pull my finger out and do more.
one day. There's time. There's time.
Got to keep the bills paid. Yeah.
I just want more Picard, and you have more Picard.
I do.
Picard
Yeah.
himself is coming out very soon. In
Yeah, very soon.
September.
It was due out in May. It was due out when the show was on, but publishing is a bit chaotic at the moment. There's lots of distribution and production issues, unsurprisingly. So it will be out in September. But I'm very excited about what people are going to make of this one. It's a book about Raffi, so about her past and her present, and it's set between seasons 1 and 2. So you can see why it should have come out in May, but can't be helped. Yeah. So it's fingers crossed for September, for
Yeah.
Christmas at least.
For Christmas. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. No, yeah, it's great. And I just want to finally, just bring up the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
Yeah.
We did. That's how we met. We went along to a lovely event put on by Amazon in London to see some great stuff. And for regular viewers, if you're confused that hasn't been mentioned yet on any of these, I went for a different channel. So you can go and see what I thought about that over at the Broken Sword YouTube channel. But that's where we met, and I don't know. I just kind of wanted to see what you think about it at the moment. We spoke a lot on the subject, obviously, while we were there, but there's been things revealed since, and images and things like that. How are you feeling about the Rings of Power at the moment?
So I'm still feeling positive. I think I'm happy to go along for the ride. I think I think, like we all said at the time when we had that Q&A with the showrunners, that there's very clearly a very clear vision of what they wanted to do across these 5 seasons, and a real knowledge and appreciation of Tolkien. I think we all felt a lot happier, didn't we? And then of course they've got to, like anybody who's working in television, which is a very expensive business, and studios tend to be risk averse. They've got to mediate all these what the studio wants. So I'm just very excited to see how much they're going to be able to get their vision on screen. Yeah. And it looks great. They clearly know what they're doing. They've had to make decisions that people aren't going to like, but I think in all these things you have to find out what the storyteller is trying to do, and give them the opportunity to try and do it. Yeah. I wasn't hooked on The Expanse, and people told me to go back, and I stuck with it longer than I usually would with a show. Payoff was absolutely worth it, I think. I've watched Wheel of Time now, which I think is probably a good clue to what the kind of thing that Amazon Studios can produce. I don't know the books. I never read them. It's not my kind of thing, but I really enjoyed that show. So I think I always try and think, what do I want someone to do when they sit down with my book? If it's a world that they know well. People know Star Trek really well, have very fixed opinions on it. But I'd like them to go, well, let me see what this person is doing and where they're trying to take me. And then at the end of it, kind of make a judgment about whether I think that was successful or not. So I'm going to kind of extend the same courtesy to these guys and say, okay, all right, let's see what you're trying to do, and then make a decision about how well you've done it. I think it's looking really nice. And certainly from all the things they said, that what they want to put on screen is really interesting. And I'm personally not bothered about things like time compression and all these sorts of things. I can see why they have to be done for storytelling reasons. Let's see where they take them with this. The Harfoots, fine. Let's see what you do with that. I see why you need hobbits, because they're a kind of oddly humanizing. Yeah, they kind of give it a groundedness. Let's see what you do with it. And if it's good, I'll enjoy it. If it makes bad moves, it makes bad moves. None of us are perfect. We live in Ardamard.
We do.
But let's see what they can do. And I won't know that until I've seen it. So
No,
but I may as well not hate it beforehand.
this is the thing, I think, isn't it? There is a I think there's almost a fashion for hating this thing, and before it's come out at the moment. A lot really, really loathe it, and which we heard very vocally, through the stuff that has been put out after that event. And I think it's one of those things that I'm similar. Time compression and things like that don't matter to me particularly. Tell me a good story, and I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing, and I think that from what, like you say, from what we heard, it sounds interesting, and I certainly will give it the time of day until we got there. But I feel like the opinions shifted a little bit. We had those orcs came out, pictures of the orcs came out recently, and people seem to enjoy that, because they look great, they look so cool.
They do.
So
I saw mixed reaction to Celebrimbor. I think people are more excited about Gil-galad. I think it's really hard if people got really fixed. I felt the same when I saw Faramir on screen. I just thought this has got nothing.
You said, yeah.
Visually nothing like it. And then the story, the changes, I really hated actually, the kind of turning his back on torture, sort of allowing it but not taking responsibility for it, were just so contrary to that character that I really disliked it. But I can see there's lots to like in Two Towers. And I think Fellowship of the Ring, if people sort of line up the Book of Fellowship against that film and see the kind of braveness with which they adapted that and compressed years, it's a phenomenal adaptation. Of course it's going to be different, but let's hope they make good choices and let's hope it looks good.
100%. Una, it's been such a joy. Thank you for giving up your time to come and have a chat with us.
My
here.
pleasure.
Love to have you back as well. Once Picard Second Self comes out, I'm going to pre-order and I'll give it a read, and maybe we could come and chat about that a little bit as well. We are covering at the moment Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So if you ever wanted to come and give an opinion on an episode, we'd love to have you on there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're near the end now, aren't we? Is it 10? Does it have 10 episodes? I'm not sure.
I don't know. We are on episode 4 because we only have the Paramount Plus stuff to go on. Because I think it was released in the States, but I think we're a wee bit behind.
A few episodes behind,
Episode 4. Okay.
I think 9 went out in the States this week. So when you get to the end, maybe we should do a Strange New World, because I've got a lot to say about Strange New Worlds. It's a really interesting show.
That's brilliant. Well,
most of it good. Yeah.
Excellent. Una, thank you so much. Everybody watching, go and check out Una's books. They are absolutely brilliant. It's wonderful stuff. It's wonderful reading. If you like these properties, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Firefly, all these Blake 7, all this kind of stuff, then you're in for a treat. So go check it out. And don't forget to no, it's no problem. It's wonderful. It's just great to read. And for all you guys, please don't forget to go back, check out our older stuff. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all of this stuff. So go check it out there, and don't forget to pop over to our website, scriptdepartment.net, for a check out of what our global network of screenwriters are up to, because they're very interesting. We're interesting people, really, I promise.
Very interesting people.
I think we're interesting people. I'm pleased you think so.
I'm interested.
Well, you're interesting as well, so that's all right.
We're very interesting.
What an interesting conversation. Brilliant. Thank you, Una. Until next time, we will see you soon. And for you guys, until next time, we will see you soon too. Bye-bye.